Why talking politics with the modern left feels like banging your head against a wall. Talking politics with the modern left feels impossible because you're not debating reality, you're debating a utopia. Every part of life, schools, workplaces, culture, even language, has been absorbed by an ideology that treats the real world as illegitimate by default. This mindset comes straight from the Frankfurt School, which was dominated by Marxists and taught that society should be judged against an imagined world without hierarchy or conflict. Under this worldview, the family must be re-engineered, schools must radicalize children, culture must be controlled, and language must be rewritten. Critical theory always finds oppression. If a system works, it reinforces power. If it fails, that's also power. If people consent, they're brainwashed. If they dissent, the system shaped their dissent. Modern branches like critical race theory, gender theory, feminism, decolonization all follow the same script. You're not arguing with people who misinterpret the world, but with people who reject it for existing. Until we recognize this, their delusions will keep ruling our institutions. So I just want to really hammer this home. This is the whole game about critical theories, everything on the left, all of these social movements that you're seeing, which is because you and I are the types of people where we look at the world as is, just like I was talking about in the last topic, going, this is how geopolitics has always worked throughout human history. Now we need to compare ourselves to that. How are we doing within that sphere? Are we faring worse? Are we faring better? But what is happening in the leftist brain, and this is what all of these movements have essentially put into these people's frames as to how they look at the world, is instead of going compared to the real world, they go, imagine the world like you would like it to be. Imagine your preferred utopia. Then identify the gaps between that and the real world, then declare those gaps as oppression, and then demand society must be remade in order to reflect your utopia.
Right.
So that's why it feels like you're trying to debate delusion, is because you are.
Yes.
And so I guess the question here would be, what does it mean for society when the family and education system become political battlegrounds?
Well, it's interesting. I think in general, family and education systems have been political battlegrounds. It's just a varying to what degree and how much does it actually lead society and in what direction does it take it. And I think we're in a very dangerous point right now. And when I say dangerous, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm looking at the things like the Charlie Kirk situation. I'm looking at the Candace Owens just came out yesterday and said there's been an assassination attempt, or there will be, on her life, and it's been funded by France. I'm not sure how real that is.
I will say I think that's bullshit.
I'm not even sure how real it is. But the fact that that's the space that we're in, that doesn't seem. When I read that, I'm actually going to go for my own opinion on that. She could be full of it. It could be nonsense. But when I heard that, I was like, seems normal given what's happening right now. That's bad. That's a bad situation. And I think a lot of this is really driven by, to your point, it's driven by ideology and emotion over logic. So what you were saying in another way is that you and I see the world through a lens of logic. We look at information and we don't get emotional about it. I mean, we do once in a while, but the reality is when we actually sit down and discuss these things and try to find answers or try to understand, we understand through the lens of logic, through just actually almost like it's math. Like, hey, here's the equation, here's the numbers. Well, here's what the answer is. This is not really debatable, and when you look at history that way, it's very obvious, providing you have true history, you understand what's going on. And it's difficult when you and I look at the problems of today and we kind of go, there are some easy solutions you can implement. And here's where I know this other group is going wrong. Now, often you don't see this till it's too late. It's the hindsight thing. But because it has actually become so delusional on the left, and because their ideas are so, I guess, idealistic would be the right word. They operate in a space of, it's not in reality. Like you said, it's kind of this make-believe world that you can't actually attain. So it's actually very clear right now that it's delusional. It's very clear right now. So from the outside looking in, you see, what's happening in families and you see what's happening in the education system. It's difficult for us because we can actually give you a solution today. And again, hindsight's usually what people can give you. Well, we could have done it this way instead. How did things get so far out of control in Germany in the 40s? Oh, we could have done this instead. You and I are looking at it right now, and I don't think we're going down the same path. I know that sounded hyperbolic, but what I'm saying is we can see the problems now, and we know what to do with them. However, then you have to look at sort of the bigger picture here in Canada. Our media is controlled. So our media is telling most people a different story. They're not even getting all the actual facts. So you talk about math, it's like, well, they're only getting half the equation. So they have a conversation with you. And yes, you have some people that are delusional, which I mentioned earlier, but then you also get a lot of people that are like, well, I watch CBC, I read the newspapers, like, I think you guys have it wrong, or I think it's like this, or I don't think it's that bad, because they're getting half the equation. So for them, it's difficult. You can't really blame them. So you have these conversations, but they don't have enough information. And then you kind of look at the education system, and it is just swamped. 88% of the education system, the teachers are liberal or Democrat. And this is a very recent statistic. So you look at that and you kind of go, well, that's compromised. And it's compromised by these current ideologies that aren't based in logic, that we can't argue with because they won't actually operate in this space of reality. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying it means that society's fractured. And to be quite honest with you, until everybody's willing to look at the entire equation, I'm not sure how we solve this problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're past the point of discussion, and I think Charlie Kirk was the pivot point for sure, where at that point when, you take out a guy that was I mean, look, do things within the official narrative seem a little flimsy? For sure. But do I also think that was some Black Ops plot? I don't think so. I haven't seen anything that's really pushed me that way yet.
Was also the response from the left was an alarming thing for me too.
And that was the biggest takeaway for me, was when I saw people like 20, I would argue like 20 to 30% of society was happy that happened.
Yes, which is insane.
Which is crazy. And that was the biggest, that is the most important thing to recognize out of the fallout of the Charlie Kirk thing, is going 20 to 30% of people are happy seeing a moderate get killed.
Yeah, and
that's
I think
wild.
And moderate is like as far as I would put him.
Yeah,
I think people don't realize that people like the Nick Fuentes group.
Mm-hmm.
They're now thriving because guys like him have been removed.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I did that whole video outlining that, where it's just like, yeah, what did you think was going to happen? Like, of course, this is what's going to happen, because you think people are then going to look at that and go, nope, we still need to debate. Like, it's like, nah, I don't know. Like,
well, now we can debate. It's just I'm going to carry a gun.
Right.
Because if you pull one, I'm going to try to shoot you first. That's the problem.
And I think too, to your point, I think there are people that take personal advantage of situations like this on the opposite side, which then look at this climate and then, because you can rally a lot of people around you going, look, these people are trying to kill me or whatever, and you can drum up a lot of support by doing that.
Yes,
and so
yes,
I think there's people that are doing that to their own benefit. And to be honest, I don't know, like some of the stuff that she's gone off with about the whole like Erica Kirk stuff and all that, I find quite disgusting.
I'm not on board with a lot of things she's saying. I just picked her as someone that this is very recent, that's going, hey, there's a credible threat in my life. And I was really saying more, my own response was, yeah, seems par for the course. That's bad.
Well, and and that I agree with, is that we now live in a society where, because had somebody said that 15 years ago, everybody would have been very easily to be like, you're a crackpot. But because we live in this climate now, you're like, well, that actually does sound a little bit. Yeah, no. So I completely agree with you there. But yeah, to your point, when you're talking about the people that, at the very beginning of the episode, where we don't have a right-wing party in Canada, you're like, what? And I remember I was even doing that when Trudeau was still in office. I would break down Trudeau's ideological background, his dad's background. Like, I mean, his dad, Pierre Trudeau, was definitely more of an intellectual. He was a lot smarter than Justin Trudeau was. But it's very easy to point to the fact that Pierre Trudeau was a socialist communist. Like, he admired Mao. He even enshrined Norman Bethune, who was a Canadian that went over and fought for the communists in China. And Pierre Trudeau created like a whole, he didn't create a national day, but he like honored him within the government for being this like Canadian hero. And you're like, for going and fighting with communists. And then, you also look at with Castro and Pierre's obvious admiration towards him. And so whenever I would put videos out like that about their background and their ideological background within the family, I remember, not a lot of people, but you would get people that'd be like, Trudeau's a fascist. And you're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I can even actually argue that, fascism and communism, once they're in operation, they're very similar. Like they both rely heavily on censorship, two-tier justice systems, propaganda, disarming citizens,
For sure.
all of this, like the base level, but it's the justifications used to get there that are different. However, it's like, if you think that Trudeau is a far-right fascist, like, you have completely lost your mind. You are delusional. And this is where you get people that say, well, real communism has never been tried. And that's because I have this idea of what communism should be in my mind. And then if reality, whether that's the Soviet Union or China or Cambodia or Cuba, if they don't match my ideal, my imagined world of perfection, then they're not actually communism. And you go, yeah, you guys are actually crazy.
Yeah, it was interesting because I asked a lot more questions. I'm starting to do this thing where I realize in the moment that this is not going to be a super productive conversation. So what I do is I push to be like, how strong is your theory? How well have you thought this out? And basically I was able to get them to the point where it was kind of like, yeah, okay, none of these systems work. And it was like, well, if we put the NDP in power, then I start asking questions about, their economic engine and how they'd actually support this and how this would work. And then they landed in libertarianism. They landed on being like, yeah, so that's more like libertarian view, I guess. I'm like, yeah, okay, good. We got somewhere. This is good.
So maybe don't pick the socialists.
So, but it was still try to keep the conversation relatively light, but it was interesting how the conversation went from like, it changed rapidly because it's not a well thought out program. It is lacking components of the equation. It is lacking logic. So by asking and staying calm, as long as they're actually willing to participate and not lose their cool, you kind of get them to go in this circle where it's like they almost have to denounce everything or eventually agree that everybody's bad and none of these systems work, which is where I kind of was able to get, which is sort of funny. But the problem was this. That was the best conversation I've had in that arena with those people. However, there was still no solution to be had, even though I know the right things to do and I kind of know the path that we're on semi-objectively. But those weren't really like, we didn't even broach into that because I know then you're going to have an inflammatory situation. Right. But so the best I was able to do was just basically be like, cool. So we all agree everything's on fire. Nothing works. Yeah. All right. Aces.
Well, and that's actually, I think that is the best thing you can do to, get somebody to start thinking more clearly, is because I really love this quote by Nietzsche as well, where he said, convictions are greater enemies to truth than lies. And I think that's 100% true. Is like, so if you don't need to prove that somebody is lying or put them on their back foot or attack them. But if you can just get them to realize through questions like you're talking about, like the Socratic method, if you can get them to understand that they don't really have as many justifications for their convictions as they think they do, then you can actually start to get through with them. And it's not even like you're trying to embarrass them or that you're trying to show them up, but you can just get them to realize, like, when you ask 2 or 3 questions deep about their thoughts, they just start to go, oh, wow, I have these really strong opinions, but I really don't have any knowledge to back them up on.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was kind of where we landed. And I think that's, in my opinion, or not my opinion, I guess, in my experience so far, that's the best way to handle the situation. That's the best we can do right now.
Yeah.
That's the best I've done anyway.
Yeah, I think so as well.